Hello, friends. If you're curious about the movie Waterworld, 1995, you're in the perfect place. Don't forget to give this video a quick like, it really helps us out. And if you're new here, hit subscribe to stay updated on all the latest movie deep dives. Let's jump right in. The world has drowned. Not in blood, not in flame, but in the endless churn of salt and tide. The ice caps have melted, swallowing continents, cities, histories. Civilization has collapsed beneath a sky that never stops weeping and an ocean that never gives back what it takes. There is no more land, at least, none that anyone has seen. And what remains of humanity now floats in rusted wrecks, scavenged rafts, and floating fortresses made of desperation. In this blue apocalypse, life is barter. Fresh water is currency. Dirt is myth. And the horizon offers no promise, only peril. Out of the haze of salt and silence comes a figure. A man with no name, no allegiance, and no home. He sails alone across the endless ocean on a catamaran that moves like a creature, a vessel made from scavenged ingenuity and unbreakable will. He is not a hero. He is not interested in saving anyone. He's simply surviving, breath by breath, tide by tide. A drifter. A trader. A man who speaks little and trusts less. But he is different. He is not entirely human. Or perhaps he is simply what humanity is becoming. Gills slit the sides of his neck. Webbing laces his feet. Evolution has whispered to him, offering him a choice where the rest of the world was only given extinction. And for this, he is feared. Hunted. Called freak. But he is alive, and that is more than most can say. His path changes when he arrives at a ramshackle floating city called an atoll. A fortress of the sea, guarded with suspicion and violence, where a strange kind of society limps forward amid rust and ritual. He seeks only to trade. But the people there see something else in him, an opportunity or a threat. They imprison him, strip him, probe his secrets. And while they weigh what he's worth, the sky above grows darker. Because something is coming. They call them smokers, pirates on jet skis and jury-rigged ships, armed to the teeth and ruled by madness. They are chaos incarnate, worshipping oil and destruction, led by a man whose smile hides the gleam of insanity. He's called Deacon, and he commands a ship once known as the Exxon Valdez, now a floating fortress of death and diesel. He's hunting for a child. A girl. She lives in the atoll, marked by a strange tattoo on her back. A map, they say. A path to what the world no longer believes exists, dry land. She doesn't know where she came from. She only knows that people look at her differently. Some with hope. Others with fear. And Deacon, he wants her not to understand her, but to use her. To find what no one else can. In the chaos of the smokers' attack, the walls of the atoll are breached. Metal groans. Flames rise. Screams cut through the roar of engines and bullets. Amid the wreckage, the drifter, reluctantly, violently, fights his way free. And in the process, finds himself entangled with the girl and her guardian, a woman named Helen who will risk everything to protect her. He doesn't want them on his boat. He says no. He says nothing. But when the ocean is your only home, and enemies swarm from all sides, sometimes you don't get to choose who you carry with you. What begins is a journey across the sea like no other. The drifter, Helen, and the girl set sail into a world that is equal parts beautiful and brutal. They pass through ghost towns submerged beneath coral, through floating markets where teeth are traded like currency, through storms that peel the skin from your bones. Trust is a fragile thing. Tension runs high. The drifter is not kind, but he is not cruel. He is something harder to define. He teaches them to survive, to fish, to drink water pulled from the sea itself. And slowly, painfully, they begin to understand him. Not as a savior, but as something closer to truth. But the sea is not still for long. Deacon pursues them with relentless fury, using the full strength of his floating army to track the girl. His madness grows louder. His belief that she will lead him to dry land becomes obsession. He turns his wrath upon every survivor he encounters, offering salvation in exchange for information and fire for resistance. His speeches are both terrifying and strangely magnetic. He's not just a villain. He's a prophet of ruin. As the drifter's catamaran is battered and broken, the trio is captured, torn apart, tortured. But the girl never breaks. And the drifter, left for dead, does what no man should be able to. He survives the deep. Not by magic, but by nature's quiet, ruthless gift. The final act is not just about escape. It's about revelation. The girl's tattoo is more than a symbol. It's a riddle. A map not of direction, but of reckoning. And in the final stretch, as Deacon's ship burns, and the ocean itself seems to scream with fury, the path to dry land emerges, not as myth, but as memory. A mountain peak. A garden. A place untouched by salt. But not everyone makes it. Sacrifice stains the tide. Fires burn across the waves. And even in victory, the ocean refuses to give peace. The film ends not with triumph, but with possibility. The drifter does not stay. He cannot. Land is not his home. He belongs to the sea. But he leaves behind something unspoken. A chance. A future. And in the silence of his departure, as sails catch the wind and the horizon stretches out like a secret, we're reminded that even in the darkest waters, hope floats. This was never just a story about a man or a map. It was about belief. About the aching human need to find something solid beneath our feet. About what we become when the world we knew is gone, and all that's left is each other. And the sea. Always the sea. Endless. Terrible. Beautiful. And watching. The sky hangs low, smeared with the haze of evaporated dreams. The sun, fierce and punishing, glares down on an earth that no longer remembers itself. The seas have swallowed everything. Mountains, monuments, the myths of dry land. Nothing remains but water and what floats on it. And in this watery grave, survival is less about strength than about knowing how to stay just ahead of desperation. Somewhere in this flooded world, a sail crests the horizon. Not a ship, not quite. More of a machine, strange and elegant, stitched together from the bones of a past long drowned. It glides across the sea like a beast with a pulse, pulled by wind and grit. Its captain is alone, a man who has no allegiance, no nation, no name. He is simply the mariner, a drifter moving between what's left of civilization, bartering goods, keeping his distance. The world has made him hard. The sea has made him harder. He arrives at a floating city, an atoll held together by rusted metal and suspicion. It's one of many like it, cobbled together from sunken salvage, where people cling to a semblance of community amid the slow decay of order. He comes to trade. Nothing more. He offers dirt, precious, impossible dirt, a relic of land long gone. The others eye it with wonder and fear. Dirt is currency. Dirt is power. And the man who carries it is immediately suspect. They don't know what he is. Not yet. But they can tell he's different. The mariner keeps his secrets locked tight, but not tight enough. When he's forced to fight, the truth comes out, not with words, but with the sight of gills slitting open behind his ears. Webbed feet. The signs of evolution or mutation, depending on who you ask. Either way, it's enough. Fear spreads through the atoll like fire. The people, already stretched thin by hunger and fear, turn on him. He's captured, caged like an animal. A freak. Something not of this world, or at least, not of the world they remember. While imprisoned, he meets others caught in the eddies of this broken society. There's Helen, a woman hardened by survival, but not untouched by compassion. She runs a trading post, clinging to her role as a provider, a caretaker. With her is a young girl, Enola, fiery, inquisitive, and marked. Literally. On her back is a tattoo, a strange and intricate design that some whisper is a map. Not to treasure, but to something far more dangerous. Far more valuable. Dry land. It's a myth. A dream. A bedtime story told to children bobbing on oil drums and driftwood. But dreams are dangerous in a world like this. They spark hope. And hope makes people do foolish things. There are others who dream of land, too. But not to restore it, to conquer it. The smokers are pirates, mercenaries of the sea, riding jet skis and jury-rigged vessels that belch smoke and death. Their leader is Deacon, a man of twisted charisma who wears menace like a smile. His ship, a rusted behemoth that once bore the name of a long-dead oil giant, is now a floating fortress of violence. Deacon believes in land, not as salvation, but as control. And he believes the girl's tattoo will lead him there. As the atoll descends into fear and chaos, the smokers strike. Their attack is ruthless. Explosions rip through the floating city. People scream, fire rains from the sky, and chaos erupts like a wound. In the midst of it, Helen makes a choice. She frees the mariner, not because she trusts him, but because he's the only one who might survive the storm. Together, with Enola, they flee into the sea, cutting through fire and wreckage aboard his catamaran. It is not rescue. It is necessity. At sea, tension runs high. The mariner doesn't want passengers. He is solitary by nature, shaped by silence and salt. He sees Helen and Enola as burdens. Liabilities. But the ocean doesn't allow easy choices, and soon, necessity becomes something more complicated. They begin to rely on each other, if not for affection, then for survival. The catamaran becomes a floating stage, a place where these three people begin to collide and fracture in rhythms both tender and cruel. Helen challenges the mariner's isolation, pushing him to see beyond the code of survival he's written for himself. Enola needles at him with curiosity, drawing him into conversations he never meant to have. She is bold, stubborn, and fearless. She's also haunted, by dreams, by memories she doesn't understand. She talks of trees, of land, of things she's never seen but feels in her bones. And always, just beyond the horizon, the smokers are closing in. Deacon grows more obsessed with the girl. He dispatches scouts, interrogates survivors, promises salvation to those who help him, leaves wreckage for those who don't. His madness is not manic, it's measured. He speaks of destiny, of power. He believes the map on Enola's back is divine providence. That land is his for the taking. And the mariner? He becomes the obstacle, the shadow standing between him and his inheritance. Back on the catamaran, things fall apart. Food runs low. A storm lashes the boat, tearing sails, snapping lines. The sea reasserts its dominance. The mariner lashes out. He nearly throws Enola overboard in a moment of fury and fear. Helen defends the girl, and for a moment it seems the alliance will shatter. But something shifts. The mariner, in a rare act of vulnerability, shows them how he survives, how he dives beneath the surface, breathing through gills, navigating the sunken world below. He brings them treasures from the deep, a glimpse into a world lost and forgotten. They arrive at a floating marketplace, a grotesque carnival of the sea where everything has a price and nothing has meaning. Here, they hope to find answers, rest, supplies. But the smokers have already cast their nets. Deacon's influence spreads like oil. A deal goes wrong. A fight breaks out. The trio is captured. Helen and Enola are taken. The mariner is left for dead. And yet, he survives. He always does. Wounded, driven by something he can't name, he rebuilds. Repairs his ship. Tracks the smokers. Not out of vengeance, not entirely. But because something in him has changed. The girl, the woman, they cracked something in him. Not love, not yet. But memory. Of humanity. Of belonging. The very thing he thought the sea had stripped from him. He follows the trail of fire and steel, heading toward the belly of the enemy's ship. The Valdez looms like a sea monster, belching black smoke, churning the waves with rusted might. Inside, Deacon preaches to his crew like a messiah, promising land, salvation, a new kingdom. And in the center of it all, Enola waits, chained, defiant, still silent about the map etched into her back. The ocean holds its breath. Something is coming. Something vast, something final. But for now, the sea stretches on, endless and unforgiving. And somewhere within it, a man sails alone again. Not because he wants to, but because he must. He is not finished. Not yet. The sea is quiet again, but only for a moment. Beneath its still surface, something stirs, vengeance, resolve, and the memory of what was taken. The mariner's catamaran cuts through the water like a scar, patched and repaired, stronger than before. Every inch of sail, every line of rope, every bolt reaffirms a truth. He is not done. Not while Helen and Enola remain in the clutches of a madman. Not while the only truth worth chasing may still be written in ink upon a child's back. Far away, the Deacon prepares his floating fortress. The Exxon Valdez groans and churns, its rusted body held together by worship and fear. It is no longer a ship. It is a kingdom. And Deacon is its king, a pirate prophet riding the edge of madness, draped in black humor and gasoline. He addresses his followers like a preacher, promising dry land, salvation, a future where they rule the last corner of the earth not swallowed by sea. His sermons are laced with threats and charm. He doesn't lead by force. He leads by spectacle. Enola, chained in a makeshift cell deep in the ship's hold, remains unbroken. She is a small spark surrounded by darkness, and her defiance burns brighter the more they try to break her. The Deacon circles her like a vulture dressed in robes of oil-soaked authority. He wants what's on her back, not the girl, not the soul, just the map. But Enola doesn't understand it. It's a tattoo, a riddle she carries unknowingly, etched by a hand long gone, its meaning buried in myth and measurement. Above deck, Helen watches. She's not caged, not physically. She's been brought to the Deacon's side, shown the spoils of command, offered a place of safety in exchange for silence. But she resists. Her loyalty isn't loud, but it's fierce. She doesn't scream or plot. She waits. She watches the horizon, believing, without reason, that the mariner will come. That he's not finished with them. That somewhere in that vast godless ocean, he's still sailing. And she's right. He arrives not with an army, but with wind in his sails and steel in his gaze. He infiltrates the ship under cover of night, moving through the belly of the beast like a shadow of salt and vengeance. The Valdez is vast, a city of chaos afloat, but he knows how to navigate disorder. He slips between rusted ladders, beneath grates, over oil drums. The closer he gets to the girl, the more the sea seems to rise behind him, as if the ocean itself is angry. But this is not a clean rescue. The Deacon is no fool. He anticipates the mariner's return, even respects it. He sets a trap. And when the two finally meet, face to face, breath to breath, it is not with immediate violence, but with words. They circle each other, predator and predator, each shaped by a world without ground. The Deacon tries to bargain, to confuse, to twist. But the mariner doesn't speak much. His eyes do. And they say everything. A fight erupts, brutal, close, without flair. It is not choreographed for beauty. It's dirty, full of desperation and rage. Amidst the chaos, fire breaks out aboard the Valdez. The ship, soaked in oil and sins, begins to burn. Screams rise. The cult of smokers splinters, some fleeing, others praying to the madness they once served. The mariner finds Enola as the flames climb. She clings to him, not with fear, but with recognition. A lifeline returned. Helen joins them, leading them toward escape, but time has run thin. The Valdez is no longer a vessel, it is a floating inferno. Their only hope lies in ascent. High above, the mariner launches a balloon, crafted hastily from scraps, a plan made with desperation. It was meant as a backup. Now, it's the only way out. As the deck buckles beneath them, they rise, the fire's glow casting them in silhouette. From below, the Deacon fires one last shot, a final grasp at power. The balloon jerks. Rope snaps. Enola nearly falls. The mariner dives after her, not hesitating, even if it means certain death. But the sea does not claim them. Not yet. In the aftermath, aboard the balloon drifting through the sky, they find a strange quiet. The mariner, battered and silent, rests. Helen clutches Enola, who watches the horizon, still searching. She never stopped. And then they see it. Land. Not a myth. Not a memory. But real, rising from the sea like a promise long broken. Green and sharp, with mountains piercing clouds, rivers running wild, trees bending in wind. A world untouched. A place beyond barter and blood. They land in silence, barefoot on solid ground, the weight of soil unfamiliar beneath their feet. The girl laughs. Helen weeps. The mariner stands apart, unsure. He was not made for this. They explore the new world, finding the remnants of the old, a cabin half swallowed by jungle, relics of a life before the flood. Clothes. Maps. Pictures of a child with the same tattoo. Enola stares at the photograph, silent. This was her home. Somehow, the tattoo was not just a map. It was a memory, a mark meant to lead her home. The revelation is both miraculous and painful. Dry land exists, but it came at a cost, and it demands something in return. The mariner knows this. He cannot stay. Helen begs him to. Enola clings to him, not as a savior, but as something closer to family. But the mariner looks at the horizon and sees not peace, but confinement. His gills twitch in the mountain air. His webbed feet are clumsy on dirt. He belongs to the sea, even if the sea has taken everything from him. And so, without fanfare, he rebuilds his sailboat. Small, sleek, meant for one. As he pushes off from shore, Helen and Enola watch. They don't cry. They understand. Some souls are too bound to the tide to ever anchor themselves. The boat sails out, catching wind like breath. And the water accepts him again, not as a man returning, but as one who never truly left. Out there, beyond the edge of sight, the sea stretches wide and endless. It holds no answers, only motion. But for the mariner, that's enough. He was never looking for land, he was only ever looking for a way to keep going. And now he sails on. Not alone in spirit, but alone by nature. A man between two worlds, neither of land nor sea, but of survival. And somewhere in the stillness that follows, we realize the story was never just about finding dry ground. It was about what you become when the world forgets what solid earth feels like, and how, sometimes, the most human thing you can do is keep sailing anyway. The ocean in this story is not just a setting, it's a force that carves its mark into every soul left to drift upon it. And like the sea itself, the characters are weathered, unpredictable, shaped by time and loss. They do not walk through their story. They float, crash, sink, and rise again, all of them survivors in a world that no longer has a place for dreams. What makes them compelling is not how different they are from us, but how much of our desperation, resilience, and longing lives in them, pressed deep beneath the surface like wreckage waiting to be found. The mariner moves through this world like a myth already fading. He is neither a hero nor a villain, neither savior nor monster. At first glance, He is a man of few words, barely more than a silhouette against the horizon. His eyes squint from behind unkempt hair, skin tanned and scarred by sun and salt. He has lived alone for so long that solitude no longer feels like a choice. It's simply his way of being. But his presence tells a deeper story. He is evolution in motion, bearing gills along his neck, webbed feet beneath the surface. Signs that the sea has not only shaped him spiritually, but physically. He is not merely surviving the Waterworld. He is becoming a part of it. And with that transformation comes something quietly tragic. Because while the others yearn for dry land, for memory, for the return of what once was, the mariner has moved beyond it. He doesn't long for the past. He exists entirely in the now. What's most compelling about him, though, is not what he is, but what he becomes when forced into connection. At first, he resists Helen and Enola with every fiber of his being. He does not care about their story. He does not want their company. But beneath that coldness is something softer, buried so deep he's forgotten it exists. Slowly, over the course of the journey, they chip away at the armor he has forged from solitude. Not with kindness, always, but with persistence. And something changes. He doesn't become sentimental. He doesn't suddenly believe in miracles. But he begins to care. Caring, for the mariner, is not a declaration. It's a decision. A quiet shift. A moment where he chooses to stay, to fight, to return. When he risks his life to save Enola, it is not about heroism. It's about identity. In saving her, he begins to save something of himself, something human, something almost forgotten. And when he finally chooses to leave her behind on dry land, it's not abandonment. It's recognition. He is not meant for the world she will grow up in. He is meant to sail alone, because the ocean is the only place left where his kind can still belong. Helen, by contrast, is all fire held tight behind a wall of practicality. She is not naive. She has seen what the world is. She has fought for scraps, bartered for safety, made impossible choices. And yet, she carries hope like an ember in her chest. She doesn't chase dry land like a dreamer. She chases it because she believes survival means more than floating in place. She believes in more than endurance. She believes in the possibility of change. Her relationship with the mariner begins in mutual distrust, crackling with tension. She sees him as a means to an end, but also as a threat. He sees her as a complication, as someone who will eventually betray him like everyone else. But over time, that tension deepens, not into romance, necessarily, but into something more elemental. They recognize each other. Two creatures carved by this broken world, both unwilling to give up, both scarred by loss. She doesn't soften him with love. She mirrors him with resilience. And when she risks everything to protect Enola, she does so not as a mother, but as someone who knows that legacy must be preserved. She is fiercely maternal, but never reduced to it. Her strength is not loud. It's in her eyes, her choices, her refusal to break. And then there is Enola, the spark, the question, the beating heart of the entire film. She is more than a symbol, more than the map on her back. She is not just the key to dry land. She is a reminder of what innocence looks like when it survives destruction. But Enola is not helpless. She is brave, often reckless, and more perceptive than either of the adults realize. She questions the mariner, challenges his cruelty, draws pictures of trees and birds and life on land even though she's never seen any of them. Her belief in what's possible is not fantasy. It's faith. It is through Enola that we see how the world might heal. Not just physically, but emotionally. She teaches both Helen and the mariner how to hope again, not by preaching, but simply by existing, by never giving up, by never letting the sea define her. She becomes the reason the mariner returns. The reason Helen holds on. The reason the story doesn't drown under its own despair. And yet, it's not just the central trio who reflect the world they inhabit. The Deacon, for all his madness, is one of the most dangerously charismatic villains ever to drift across a post-apocalyptic screen. He's not a brute. He's a manipulator. A man who understands the power of myth and uses it like a weapon. He doesn't lead with fear alone. He leads with promises. He gives his followers something to believe in, even if it's built on lies. He turns oil and destruction into religion. His genius lies in presentation. He wears humor like a mask, makes jokes while committing atrocities, grins while burning everything down. His greatest threat is not that he wants land. It's that he believes he deserves it more than anyone else. The Deacon doesn't see Enola as a child. He sees her as a possession, a compass, a throne. And in that sense, he represents the old world, the one that devours innocence to preserve power. Where the mariner evolves and Helen endures, the Deacon exploits. He is humanity's worst traits amplified by desperation. And yet even among his ranks there are glimmers of humanity, smokers who hesitate, who fear him, who aren't entirely gone. The world is not black and white. It is made of people making choices, often the wrong ones, simply to survive. That nuance is what makes the entire cast of characters feel so lived in, so believable. They are all clinging to scraps, not just of food or fuel, but of identity. Even the minor characters, the ones we meet briefly on floating markets or drifting islands, reflect different shades of post-apocalyptic humanity. There are con men, traitors, zealots, and silent observers. Some try to recreate society. Others try to forget it ever existed. Every one of them is a mirror, held up to the viewer, asking, "What would you do if the world vanished beneath the waves?" And in the middle of all this, tethering the story together, is the quiet, growing bond between three people who should never have found each other. The mariner, Helen, and Enola are not a family in any traditional sense. But they become one, not through blood or ceremony, but through survival, sacrifice, and the shared hope that something better might still be out there. When the mariner chooses to sail away at the end, it's not a rejection of that bond. It's an acknowledgement of it. He leaves not because he doesn't care, but because he does. Because he knows that his place is out there, on the water, making sure that what he found isn't taken again. He becomes a guardian, not of people, but of possibility. The film never forces resolution. It doesn't tie its characters into neat endings. It lets them drift, collide, and evolve. And in doing so, it reveals something deeper beneath the waves, that even in a world washed clean of memory, humanity endures, not through conquest, but through connection. That is the true anchor beneath the story. And it is what makes these characters unforgettable. It's hard to imagine that behind the salt-stained sails and windswept oceans of that post-apocalyptic world lies a film set haunted by chaos, cursed by weather, and stretched to the very edge of ruin. But that's exactly what happened. What we see on screen is a floating dystopia, majestic in its madness. What happened behind the scenes, however, is a saga so turbulent, so strange, it nearly sank the production long before a single scene made it to theaters. From the beginning, this movie was never going to be easy. Not just because of the concept, an ocean-locked, high-budget science fiction adventure filmed almost entirely on open water, but because everything about it seemed to invite the impossible. The film was greenlit at a time when practical effects still ruled, but technology hadn't quite caught up with the vision. And what began as a bold idea about a flooded Earth quickly turned into one of the most ambitious and infamous productions in Hollywood history. Let's start with the ocean itself. You can't control the sea, no matter how many boats or cranes or millions of dollars you throw at it. The original plan was to build sets just offshore in Hawaii, where the waters were calm and the skies mostly clear. But within days of filming, it became clear the production had underestimated just how powerful and unpredictable those waters could be. The massive floating set, meant to serve as the atoll fortress, began drifting away in the current during filming. Entire takes were ruined because the background was no longer where it had been moments earlier. Actors and crew alike became seasick. Equipment shorted out from salt exposure. And when storms came, and they often did, they didn't just pause filming. They destroyed entire sections of the set. At one point, a particularly savage squall tore apart a major set piece overnight, setting the production back weeks and costing millions in repairs. That floating atoll? It weighed over 1,000 tons and had to be anchored to the sea floor, but the moorings often failed, sending the entire structure swaying out of position. Divers worked around the clock just to keep it stable. Then there was the catamaran, the sleek, multi-sail vessel captained by the film's mysterious protagonist. It wasn't just a prop. It was a working boat. A complicated one. And it was constantly breaking down. During one scene, the boat capsized with the lead actor still aboard, tossing him into the Pacific and forcing safety crews to dive in after him. Fortunately, he was unharmed, but the moment solidified the chute's reputation for being both dangerous and cursed. If the ocean was the first enemy, the second was the budget. Originally forecast at around $100 million, the production ballooned to over $175 million, an astronomical number in the mid-1990s. As costs spiraled out of control, the media pounced. Headlines branded the film Fishtar and Kevin's Gate, references to earlier cinematic disasters. Critics hadn't seen a frame, but the myth of its failure had already taken root. It didn't matter that the sets were stunning, or that the stunts were real, or that the scale was unprecedented. The world expected it to drown before it could swim. And part of that myth came from the behind-the-scenes friction between the star and the director. The two had worked together before, but this film pushed both men to their limits. Rumors swirled about creative disagreements, shouting matches, and last-minute rewrites. At one point, the star reportedly took over editing control from the director, believing the film needed a steadier hand to survive post-production. Whether that was true or simply another wave in the ocean of gossip, it became part of the legend. Still, for all the conflict, there were moments of strange beauty behind the camera. Some of the stunts filmed were nothing short of miraculous. The jet ski chases were done practically, with real vehicles launching over ramps hidden just below the water. The explosions were timed to the rhythm of the waves. And the diving sequences were filmed with divers swimming alongside the actors, capturing footage in water teeming with jellyfish, coral, and the constant threat of undercurrents. Then there was the matter of the floating village. Constructed at sea, with no land access, it required all cast and crew to travel by boat each day just to reach set. That meant every costume, every lunch, every piece of film equipment had to be ferried across open water, through sun, rain, and wind. There were no trailers. No real toilets. No place to run if something went wrong. Cast and crew spent hours under the blistering sun, unable to escape, often shooting in soaking clothes, exposed skin burning and blisters forming from prolonged sea exposure. It became a test of endurance as much as art. And amidst all the madness, there were tiny, surreal moments that now feel like folklore. One actor reportedly refused to wear sunscreen, insisting it would mess with his character's authenticity. He developed second-degree burns. Another spent so much time in wet clothing that he got a rare form of sea rash that had to be treated by a specialist flown in from the mainland. And the extras, often overlooked, became their own little society, floating together on rafts, ad-libbing reactions to explosions, forming bonds as tight as those of castaways stranded in real life. One day, a whale passed beneath the set, causing a panic among the crew. At first, it was mistaken for a shark. Boats scattered. Divers surfaced in a frenzy. But the whale simply passed beneath them, a silent titan brushing up against their world of props and fantasy, as if to remind them that this ocean belonged to no one. Then there was the matter of the script. The original screenplay went through numerous revisions, with multiple writers brought in to polish, restructure, and reimagine. As production dragged on, scenes were rewritten on the fly. Entire subplots vanished. Rumors spread of alternate endings, one where the protagonist chose to stay on dry land, another where the island wasn't real at all. In the final version, we get a bittersweet resolution, but many crew members say the filmed ending was debated until the last day of shooting. Amid all of this, the crew started referring to the production as a shipwreck in motion. And yet, somehow, out of that wreckage came a film that, despite its reception at the time, has endured. Not just because of the sheer spectacle, but because of how it was made. In an era where green screens were beginning to replace real locations, this film insisted on building an oceanic world by hand. It insisted on real boats, real waves, real peril. That commitment, however difficult, gave the movie a weight that CGI never could. Years later, fans and critics alike began to revisit it, to see beyond the chaos and recognize the artistry beneath the storm. The performances, once dismissed as stoic or cold, began to reveal depth. The world-building, once mocked for being too far-fetched, started to feel prophetic in a world increasingly obsessed with climate and catastrophe. What once seemed like folly began to look like vision. And those strangest facts, the boat that drifted off mid-scene, the storms that destroyed sets, the whale that swam through production, the millions spent just to ferry people to work every morning, those things became not footnotes, but the beating heart of the legend. Because this wasn't a film that happened in spite of chaos. It was a film that became itself through chaos. A story about survival that was, in every sense, survived by its own cast and crew. A myth of a drowned world told by people who, for one strange summer, nearly drowned in it themselves. And if that isn't cinema at its most delirious and beautiful, what is? It begins, as many legends do, with water. But not just water, water as everything. The story washes in not like a storm, but a slow, rising tide, erasing the world we knew and replacing it with a boundless blue. Cities are gone. Borders have vanished. The land itself has become a rumor. And into this oceanic silence, the film dares to ask, what remains of us when the world we built has sunk beneath the sea? From its opening moments, the film invites critical analysis not just as a post-apocalyptic spectacle, but as a meditation on adaptation, on survival, on how humanity reshapes itself when every structure, political, geographical, even moral, has dissolved. It's not just about a man on a boat. It's about what happens when hope floats just far enough ahead to keep us chasing, and what it costs to keep swimming. The opening event, one of the film's most striking choices, isn't a crash, or a bang, or an exposition dump. It's a urination. A man on a boat, recycling his bodily waste into drinking water. It's a jarring, even uncomfortable image. But critically, it sets the tone immediately. This is a world where nothing is wasted, where survival is literal, elemental. It tells us we are watching not just the end of civilization, but the recalibration of existence itself. Every drop counts. Every act is essential. Critics at the time were divided. Some saw this introduction as audacious, others as distasteful. But its thematic power is undeniable. It strips the story to its bones. There's no glamour here. No nostalgic pining for the lost world. Just necessity. Just survival. And then, there's the arrival at the atoll. The floating village, a patchwork of metal and human desperation, becomes the first stage upon which the film begins to examine society in collapse. It's a microcosm, reflecting how even in ruin, people cling to hierarchy. They form councils. They have guards. They impose law, as fragile as the ropes that tie their platforms together. And they fear what they do not understand. Enter the mariner. His presence is more than a plot device. He is a disruption to their order, a walking embodiment of the future they're afraid to face. He is change, literal evolution. And the moment they see his gills, his strangeness, their society reacts in the only way it knows how, with rejection. He is caged, dehumanized, nearly executed. From a critical perspective, this is where the film begins its interrogation of otherness. The mariner's biology challenges their belief in what it means to be human, and they cannot accept it. But there's another undercurrent. The mariner has dirt. Real, tactile, earthy soil. It's not just a symbol of land, it's a threat to the status quo. If dry land exists, everything the atoll society has built becomes obsolete. And so, the film begins to weave a deeper critique, that those in power, even at the end of the world, will protect their illusions to maintain control. Then come the smokers. A violent, oil-worshipping cult led by the Deacon, who rides not just on jet skis but on charisma and chaos. Their introduction is explosive, literally. They tear through the atoll with fire and laughter, not just to conquer but to dismantle. From a critical standpoint, they are more than just antagonists. They are the consequences of unchecked resource worship. They burn what little they have left, powered by ancient oil, clinging to relics of a world that no longer exists. The Deacon, in particular, is a masterstroke of satire. He's a leader who blends charm with cruelty, absurdity with violence. He delivers monologues that feel half religious, half infomercial. He refers to Exxon like a holy word. Critics have pointed to him as a reflection of corporate greed rebranded as faith, an amalgamation of dictator, televangelist, and CEO. He doesn't just want land. He wants dominion. And he'll take it with a smile. And in the center of it all is Enola, the child marked with a map. The narrative's symbolic anchor. She represents the future, yes, but more importantly, she represents memory. The tattoo on her back is more than coordinates. It's a remnant of the world that once was, a roadmap out of chaos. Her presence introduces a critical shift in the film's thematic core, from survival to possibility. Critics have debated her role. Is she a MacGuffin, a plot device disguised as a person? Or is she the film's moral compass? The answer lies in how the characters react to her. She forces them to remember what hope looks like. Not in grand gestures, but in small acts. In drawings. In defiance. In laughter that pierces the rust. Helen, Enola's guardian, stands as the film's quiet conscience. She is not a fighter by trade, but by necessity. Her role is to bridge the past and future, not just to protect Enola, but to believe in her. Her choices, especially the decision to free the mariner, mark key narrative turns. Critics noted that she is often framed in close-ups that show resilience, not romanticism. Her strength is in belief, not brute force. She is the anchor that stops the mariner from drifting back into the coldness of survival alone. And then there's the shift, the open sea, the journey. As the trio drifts further from the atoll, the film leaves behind questions of society and begins to probe questions of self. The mariner's arc becomes one of reluctant transformation. He is not redeemed by love, but by responsibility. He begins the film as something nearly inhuman. By its middle, he is a guardian. Not out of duty, but because something has awakened in him, empathy. This transformation isn't clean. Critics often cited the mariner's violence, his early cruelty, his attempt to throw Enola overboard. But those moments are essential. They show how far he must come. His evolution mirrors the world's, slow, painful, incomplete. When he dives to the ocean floor and shows Helen the sunken cities, it's not a spectacle. It's a lament. A funeral for everything lost. He has lived in that graveyard. She has only imagined it. That moment is the film's heart. And what follows is the acceleration toward conflict, toward fire and fury and the return of the Deacon. His second assault is no longer about conquest. It's about control. He kidnaps Enola, tries to decode the tattoo. And critically, he doesn't seek understanding, just utility. That's the difference. The film doesn't portray him as someone who wants to know the past. He wants to own the future. And it's that impulse the film condemns most fiercely. The climax, aboard the burning Valdez, is pure metaphor. Oil fueling destruction. Religion warped into chaos. And in the middle of it, a child marked by knowledge being pulled from the wreckage. The mariner's rescue is not just physical, it's symbolic. He is reclaiming the future from those who would burn it for power. And then, finally, the arrival. Land. It is not lush or majestic. It is quiet. It is real. A mountain peak piercing the sea. A place untouched. The characters' reactions say everything. Enola runs. Helen kneels. The mariner stares. Critics have noted the film's refusal to end with celebration. There is no parade. No monologue. Just stillness. And the realization that survival was never the goal. Belonging was. And that's why the mariner leaves. It is the film's boldest emotional beat. He sails away, not because he is ungrateful, but because he understands. He is no longer of the land. His body, his spirit has changed. He is part of the sea now, and the sea still needs a protector. He leaves them to build something new while he returns to the tide. Critically, this ending reshapes the film. What seemed like a conventional hero's journey becomes a meditation on transformation. The mariner is not a conqueror. He is a bridge between what we were, what we became, and what we might be again. At the time of its release, the film was dismissed by many. Too long. Too strange. Too ambitious. But with distance, critics have begun to see it for what it was, a flawed, powerful parable. A film that dared to be about more than spectacle. That asked us to confront how we treat the earth, each other, and ourselves. And in a time where rising oceans are no longer fantasy, where displacement is a global crisis, and where hope often feels drowned beneath the waves, its resonance is louder than ever. This wasn't just a film about water. It was a film about what we do when there's nothing left but water, and the courage to keep going. There are movies that unfold on screen like a dream, impossible worlds spun from sound and celluloid, and then there are the stories behind those dreams, tangled in sweat, sun, and more than a little madness. This particular film, born from the wild ambition of drowning the world and letting humanity drift across its ruins, wasn't just shot on water. It was swallowed by it. It didn't just depict a desperate world, it became one. And the story of how it was made is every bit as gripping, chaotic, and awe-inspiring as the film itself. The idea was simple. The execution? Anything but. From the moment the first script floated across a studio desk, it was clear this wasn't a story that could be told within the safety of a soundstage or the green screens of controlled sets. This would require open water. Real boats. Real weather. Real risk. And that commitment to reality would become the production's defining trait, its greatest virtue and its biggest curse. They chose Hawaii. Not for the postcard sunsets, but for the vast, open stretch of Pacific that could serve as the canvas for this post-apocalyptic world. It was isolated, consistent in weather, and deep enough to anchor entire sets to the ocean floor. What could go wrong? The answer, it turned out, was everything. First, they built the atoll. Not a miniature. Not a partial set. A full-scale floating city, constructed from steel, plastic, and the remnants of salvaged boats, designed to house actors, extras, and camera crews alike. It stretched over 1/4 of a mile in circumference and weighed more than 1,000 tons. It looked incredible. It also had no bathroom. Every day, hundreds of cast and crew were ferried out to this floating behemoth. There were no escape routes, no covered stages, no shade except what the crew rigged themselves. Sunburns were inevitable. Dehydration was constant. One extra fainted on his 3rd day just waiting for a shot to reset. Others became seasick, queasy from hours of bobbing up and down in rhythm with the camera rigs. Still, the show pushed forward. Because the water, for all its wrath, made every shot unforgettable. And then came the storms. Hawaii's beauty masks a temperament as unpredictable as it is unforgiving. One night, a squall tore through the set, ripping sails, flipping platforms, and nearly sending a camera crane to the bottom of the ocean. When dawn broke, the atoll looked like a shipwreck. Weeks of work lost in a single night. The crew, exhausted but determined, began repairs immediately. There was no time to pause. No margin for rest. The budget was already inflating, the schedule slipping further into uncharted waters. Still, there were moments of surreal wonder amid the chaos. A pod of dolphins once swam through a take, their sleek bodies leaping in the background of a wide shot. The director, rather than calling cut, let the cameras roll. "Leave it," he said. "Let the ocean remind us who's really in charge." That moment made it into the final cut, an unplanned burst of life in a world supposedly dead. Then there was the whale. During one scene, a shadow passed beneath the atoll. Massive. Silent. A gray blur beneath the waves. Panic rippled through the set. Divers surfaced. Boats were scrambled. But the creature never surfaced. It was gone as quickly as it had come, as if summoned by the film's own mythology. The crew nicknamed it Moby, and from that day forward, the legend of the set's guardian whale lived on. But for all its mystical moments, the production was grueling. The star, committed to realism, performed many of his own stunts, including dangerous dives and boat maneuvers that left him bruised and battered. At one point, he was caught in a sudden gust while filming on the catamaran, thrown overboard into a tangle of rigging. He surfaced unharmed, but shaken. The crew, rattled by how close they'd come to disaster, doubled down on safety. Still, the sea was unforgiving. Stuntmen suffered concussions. Boats capsized. Equipment corroded in the salt air. Generators had to be replaced constantly. The sound department, fighting the constant roar of waves and wind, developed custom rigs to isolate voices amid the chaos. The wardrobe team had to deal with soggy costumes that dried into stiff, salt-crusted armor by the end of each day. And then there were the rewrites. The script evolved constantly, reshaped by necessity and inspiration. One day, the director called for a new scene in the middle of a shoot, something quieter, more intimate, to balance out the bombast. The crew scrambled to build a floating hut out of leftover set pieces. The actors improvised dialogue. That scene became one of the film's emotional anchors. Proof that even amid logistical nightmares, creativity could still spark. The smokers, those chain-smoking pirates on jet skis, were a particular challenge. Their vehicles, modified for speed and aggression, often malfunctioned. Engines sputtered. Skis sank. One rider flew off a ramp and landed in a support boat, breaking 3 ribs. He was back on set a week later. The chase sequences required precision choreography, timed pyrotechnics, and aerial cinematography, all while floating. Every successful take felt like a miracle. Every explosion felt like a controlled gamble. To keep morale afloat, the cast and crew developed strange rituals. Every morning began with a chant led by the extras, half prayer, half protest, always loud. Costume assistants started hiding small toys in actors' pockets, tiny reminders that this was still make-believe, even if it felt like war. The director took to giving end-of-day speeches, standing on a cooler and quoting Melville or ancient seafarers, trying to make sense of the madness. And through it all, the catamaran became a symbol. It was sleek, fast, and utterly temperamental. It refused to steer properly. It creaked ominously in high wind. Once, it drifted off set mid-take, carried by a rogue current while the crew watched helplessly from support boats. It had to be chased down by a safety diver riding a jet ski with a tow line. The shot was lost, but the story lived on. Editing the film was its own odyssey. With hundreds of hours of footage shot from multiple cameras, some on boats, others from helicopters, post-production became a jigsaw puzzle. Scenes had to be stitched together from fragments, often filmed weeks apart, under vastly different skies. The color grading team worked overtime to maintain continuity. Sound editors layered waves, engines, and storms into a seamless backdrop. The final mix included real ocean recordings captured from deep-sea buoys, adding a texture of authenticity that pulsed beneath the score. The score itself, composed late in the process, took inspiration from sea shanties, tribal percussion, and orchestral swells meant to echo the movement of tides. The composer reportedly watched the entire film in silence, then sat at a piano for hours, playing only low, rolling notes. "The ocean," he said, "is never in a hurry, but it's always moving." And then, against all odds, the film was finished. It premiered with baggage. The press had circled like gulls for months, eager to declare it a failure. The word disaster had been written before anyone had seen a frame. But something strange happened when the lights dimmed and the first shot rolled. Audiences were transported. The ocean swallowed them, just as it had swallowed the world on screen. Over time, the perception changed. What was once mocked became admired. Its practical effects, once considered old-fashioned, became revered in an age of green screens. Its ambition, once ridiculed, became inspiring. Filmmakers cited it as proof that scale and sincerity could still exist together. Viewers rediscovered it as a fable, not perfect, but pulsing with heart. And those stories, the whale, the storms, the drifting catamaran, became part of its myth. Not just behind-the-scenes trivia, but echoes of a production that refused to drown. A crew that kept filming in a sea that wanted to take everything. A film that was built on water, tested by water, and finally, risen from it. It wasn't just made. It was survived. And in every creak of wood, every flicker of sunlight on waves, every ragged breath taken between scenes, you can feel it. The strange, miraculous story of how a world underwater found a way to surface. The first thing you notice is the horizon. Not because it's particularly majestic, but because it never ends. It stretches outward in all directions, like a sentence with no punctuation, like the world itself forgot where to stop. And in this vast, unbroken blue, something uncanny begins to stir, not just visually, but emotionally. You feel small, disoriented, and strangely unanchored. That's the power of this film's setting. It doesn't just take place in a water-covered world, it traps you in one. There is no land here. At least not until the story tells us there might be. But even then, land is not a place, it's an idea. An echo of memory, something whispered in bedtime stories and painted in the wild scrawls of a child's imagination. What we get instead is ocean. Endless, pitiless ocean. And the film doesn't shy away from it. It leans in. Fully. Every frame is soaked in blue and salt and sun. Every set, every scene, every camera movement is dictated by the tide. This is not set dressing. It's the very language of the film. Floating above this aquatic void are islands of desperation, man-made, makeshift, and barely holding together. The most iconic of them is the atoll, a floating city built from the skeletal remains of ships, scaffolding, steel drums, and hope. It is not designed to look functional. It's designed to look survived. The production designers built it full scale, a real floating structure, and the decision to place it on open water was not just a logistical gamble, it was a storytelling choice. It grounds the film's world in authenticity. The rust is real. The swaying is real. The sun-bleached ropes, the creaking planks, the endless lapping of waves against metal, all real. This realism bleeds into the atmosphere. You don't feel like you're watching a constructed future. You feel like you've been dropped into one. The atoll feels claustrophobic, not because it's small, but because it's surrounded by nothing. It floats in a void, and the camera often lingers on this juxtaposition, the tangled complexity of human life set adrift in the most featureless setting imaginable. Contrast this with the smoker's fortress, the rusted corpse of the Exxon Valdez. It doesn't float as much as it looms. Black smoke pours from its chimneys. Machinery roars from its bowels. It is industrial ruin dressed up as a warship. The contrast between this mechanical chaos and the organic desolation of the sea is striking. The Valdez isn't just a location. It's a statement. It's the last relic of an oil-soaked world, repurposed by madmen who burn the past to fuel the future. The color palette shifts here: gray, black, iron red. The camera angles grow tighter, more jagged. It's the one place in the film where shadows rule instead of sunlight. Then there's the mariner's trimaran. Sleek, practical. Every rope, every sail, every lever has a purpose. It's a character in its own right. The way it unfolds, the way it slices through water, it becomes an extension of the mariner's mind. Controlled, silent, solitary. Cinematographically, the boat is often filmed in wide shots, isolated in the frame, surrounded by endless water. It emphasizes his loneliness, his self-sufficiency, and later, the disruption of that solitude when Helen and Enola climb aboard. The film's cinematography is deeply intentional. From the outset, it chooses scale over intimacy, until it doesn't. In early scenes, the camera favors wide vistas, open skies, and long, slow pans across empty waters. It establishes a visual rhythm that mirrors the mariner's life: slow, steady, uninterrupted. When danger arrives, whether through storms or the smokers, the pace changes. Cuts become quicker. The camera moves more chaotically, often handheld, as if tossed around by the same waves as the characters. Sunlight is another character in this world. It's ever-present, glaring, oppressive. There's almost no shade in the film. That's unusual for a post-apocalyptic setting. Most choose dust, darkness, decay. This one chooses exposure, vulnerability. The brightness becomes a kind of harsh reality. There's no room to hide. Everything is laid bare. You see the sweat, the grime, the sunburn on the character's skin. The ocean doesn't allow for mystery. It only allows for endurance. That said, the ocean isn't always a villain. There are moments, brief, quiet, rare, when it feels like a place of peace. When the mariner dives beneath the surface to show Helen the ruins of a drowned city, the film shifts. The palette cools. The music softens. The camera floats. For a few minutes, the water becomes memory. Not just destruction, but preservation. Skyscrapers wrapped in coral. Streets filled with fish. It's eerie, yes, but also beautiful. It's the most intimate the ocean ever feels. The color grading plays into this emotional geography. Above water, warm tones, high exposure, sun-baked skies. Below water, blue, ethereal, almost sacred. It's a visual cue that down below, something of the old world still exists, untouched and unreachable. It also underlines the mariner's dual nature. Above, he's alien. Below, he's at home. The cinematography reinforces this. His underwater scenes are smooth, lyrical. He moves with grace. Above, he's stiff, wary, angular. The camera doesn't just show this, it feels it. Sound design plays an equally vital role. The ocean has a constant presence. Even in dialogue scenes, you hear it: waves lapping, sails creaking, ropes tightening. There's almost no true silence. This was a deliberate choice. The sea is always listening, always moving. When the mariner dives, the world goes quiet. Not silent, but muted. You hear bubbles, breathing, the soft echo of movement. It gives these scenes a dreamlike quality, contrasting sharply with the sharp, metallic noise of the smokers and their diesel-fueled chaos. The film's action scenes use setting as texture. The chase across the atoll isn't just chaos, it's geography in motion. Boats smash through gates. Jet skis leap over barriers. The ocean becomes a stage for improvisation. There's no ground to fight on, no cover to duck behind. Battles are fought on moving platforms, on shifting decks, in water that drags at every limb. It's exhausting. And it's meant to be. The film never lets the viewer forget how inconvenient the world has become. This is particularly evident in the sequences involving the smokers' assault on the atoll and, later, their kidnapping of Enola. Explosions don't land the way they do on land. Smoke doesn't billow, it dissipates. The sea, ironically, dilutes the spectacle. And that's part of the point. In a world like this, even fire has to fight to be noticed. In the climactic scenes aboard the Valdez, the set design becomes theatrical. It's all tight corridors, pulleys, cargo, and makeshift weaponry. It's a hive. A labyrinth. The lighting grows dimmer. The camera stays closer. The vastness of the ocean is replaced by the claustrophobia of desperation. And when the final confrontation spills back onto the open water, when the mariner saves Enola and the ship explodes, the film breathes again. The ocean reclaims its space. The fire is gone. The water remains. The final setting, the mythic dry land, is barely explored. We see only glimpses: green hills, birds in flight, a peak that breaks through clouds like Revelation. But it's enough. The absence of detail is the point. It's not about what the land is. It's about what it means. The camera lingers on soil, on footprints, on the way Enola runs without fear. After all the floating, the bouncing, the drifting, this stillness is profound. But the mariner doesn't stay. And when he sails away, the camera pulls back, once again placing his small boat in the center of a massive frame. The ocean, for all its danger and desolation, is his home. And that final wide shot, with his sails catching wind against a setting sun, brings the story full circle. Cinematically, the film does something bold. It turns monotony, water, water, and more water, into something layered, textured, and emotionally resonant. It doesn't fight the setting. It embraces it. It finds ways to make the sea reflect character, mood, theme. The use of real locations, real water, real boats, it adds weight, gravity, unpredictability. The camera can't cheat. The actors can't pretend. And that realism bleeds through the screen. This wasn't just a movie about a world lost to water. It was a film that let water shape its every shot, soak its every line, and dictate its every move. And in doing so, it built a cinematic language all its own, fluid, expansive, and unforgettable. It began like most bold ideas do, not with caution, but with conviction. A story set entirely on the water, in a world submerged beneath the consequences of its own excess. A lone figure drifting through a salt-drowned earth, scavenging the remnants of the old world. The pitch was wild, but everyone involved saw it for what it was, an adventure. Not just the one on screen, but the one behind it. Because from the first day of filming, it was clear this wasn't going to be just another production. They called it the floating film. And not because of its subject matter. The production wasn't anchored to any single soundstage or backlit. There were no massive studio roofs, no protective warehouse lights. There was just water, and more water. Filming took place on the open ocean off the coast of Hawaii, a decision made to achieve authenticity. But what the producers hadn't fully accounted for was how much the ocean resists being controlled. The sea has no call sheet, no reset button. And it wasn't long before everyone involved discovered that filming on water is not just a challenge, it's a test of will. The crew began referring to their workdays as maritime marathons. Every morning began before sunrise. They'd shuttle out to set by boat, some of them riding for more than an hour just to reach the floating atoll that served as one of the story's central locations. It wasn't just a set, it was a living, swaying fortress built from steel, wood, plastic barrels, and weathered imagination. Assembled in modules and lashed together, it floated on the surface like a forgotten memory of civilization, creaking and shifting with every passing wave. From the start, it was clear, this film would demand more than most. There were no trailers nearby. No cozy green rooms. No easy access to bathrooms or shade. The cast and crew worked under the searing Pacific sun, the kind that doesn't just burn, it bakes. Makeup artists found their kits melting into the floor. Costumes dried stiff with salt. Crew members developed sea legs, the kind you get not from sailing but from standing for hours on a surface that won't stop moving. And yet, amid the discomfort, camaraderie took root. The cast, led by a star known for his intensity and commitment, didn't just show up. He lived the role. He was on set early. He performed many of his own stunts, including diving into the deep with no double and learning to maneuver the complex trimaran his character sailed. One day, during a particularly complex shot involving a wind-powered jump from the catamaran's mast, he slipped. It wasn't scripted. He hit the water hard and disappeared beneath the waves. The safety team dove in immediately, hearts racing. Seconds passed like minutes. Then he surfaced, laughing. That moment became legend among the crew, a symbol of the film's spirit. It might knock you down, but if you surfaced smiling, you were doing it right. Still, not everything was so light. The catamaran itself, custom-built for the film, was as temperamental as any character. It was sleek and fast but refused to cooperate. It would veer off course without warning, capsized more than once, and nearly drifted into open sea after a mooring line snapped. One night, a freak current carried it more than 2 miles off-set. It was found at dawn, bobbing like a ghost. And the sea? Well, the sea had opinions. Storms would roll in without warning, turning calm days into chaos. One particularly brutal squall tore through a day's shoot, flipping lights, smashing cameras, and shredding canvas. The director, ever the steady hand, climbed atop a crate afterward, soaked and fuming, and told the crew, "Next time I say I want realism, remind me of today." The crew applauded. Not because it was funny, but because they'd all survived it together. When they weren't battling the elements, the cast and crew found creative ways to stay sane. One of the supporting actors, known for his dry wit, organized flotation film festivals on off days. They'd inflate pool toys, tether them around a camera monitor, and watch dailies bobbing in the ocean. Extras, some of whom had never acted before, formed a kind of floating village of their own, playing cards between takes, singing sea shanties, inventing nicknames for crew members. One key grip became known as Sea Clamp. A production assistant was dubbed Buoy Boy, after his habit of napping near the mooring lines. And then there was the Day of the Whale. Midway through production, while filming a scene far offshore, the camera crew noticed something massive passing beneath the surface. At first, panic. Shark, they thought. The water churned. But then the shadow grew larger, slower. It surfaced just briefly, a whale, ancient and indifferent, gliding silently past the set. For a moment, everything stopped. The director let the cameras roll. The sound team held their breath. That kind of thing you don't plan. You just accept it. The footage never made it into the final cut, but the moment stayed with everyone. Not every behind-the-scenes story is ocean-soaked, though. Back on land, where the editing bays were air-conditioned and dry, another kind of challenge awaited. The sheer volume of footage captured, much of it shot from multiple boats, helicopters, or underwater rigs, was overwhelming. Editors struggled to maintain continuity when clouds rolled in mid-scene or the sea's color shifted between cuts. But the payoff was undeniable. Each frame carried the weight of reality. No green screen. No digital waves. Just the real ocean and the real danger of filming in it. The director, weathered but determined, approached post-production with the same grit he brought to set. He worked closely with the composer to build a soundscape that reflected not just action, but atmosphere. The score, built on low strings and distant percussion, was designed to feel like the sea itself, constant, shifting, deep. Sound engineers layered in real ocean recordings, mixing them with the hum of sails and the clink of tools, to create a sonic texture that immersed audiences as fully as the visuals. Of course, there were tensions too. No production of this scale escapes unscathed. The lead actor and the director, close collaborators before this film, had creative disagreements. Rumors swirled about shouted arguments, about control of the editing process, about diverging visions. But if those tensions fractured anything behind the scenes, they never cracked what ended up on screen. The performance was as committed as ever. The direction stayed tight. And the film, despite every obstacle, was completed. There was a moment, near the end of the shoot, that cast and crew still talk about. It was the final day of filming on the atoll. The sun was setting, casting the water in gold. The director called for one last take, a simple shot of the ocean at dusk. No actors. No action. Just stillness. As the camera rolled, the crew, without instruction, stood in silence. No clapping. No speeches. Just the sound of waves, of wind, of the sea saying goodbye. When the camera cut, the director looked around and said quietly, "We made something impossible." He wasn't wrong. The film went on to face its share of criticism, its waves of praise and ridicule. It was branded a boondoggle by some, a visionary epic by others. But those who were there know the truth, that what they built wasn't just a movie. It was an odyssey. A true floating world, assembled and endured by people who refused to let the ocean win. And maybe that's the most remarkable behind-the-scenes story of all. That a production pushed past every boundary, logistical, physical, emotional, and still surfaced with something unforgettable. Something that carries the smell of salt, the ache of sunburn, the rhythm of waves. A story of struggle, yes, but also a story of triumph. Of artistry forged not in the comfort of sound stages, but in the crash and rise of real water. A film born from the sea, and made to endure. The world begins not with a bang in this story, but with a flood. A long, silent drowning. The oceans rise, the land disappears, and everything humanity ever built is swept beneath the tide. Cities vanish. Maps become irrelevant. Borders dissolve. What remains is salt, sky, and the scraping of survival against the ribs of those left floating. It's a premise built for spectacle, but beneath the waves and waves of action lies a film surging with metaphor, one that quietly asks, what does it mean to endure when everything is lost? On its surface, the story might seem like just another post-apocalyptic fable. But look deeper, and the water begins to shimmer with layered meaning. Every rusted boat, every drop of fresh water, every piece of dirt carries weight beyond the literal. The world may be submerged, but the themes rise, bold and relentless. At the heart of the film is the concept of transformation, not just of the planet, but of the human condition. This is a world where adaptation is survival. And nowhere is that more apparent than in the character of the mariner. He is the future's reluctant herald, his body physically altered by the world's new demands. Gills behind his ears. Webbed feet. He doesn't speak of these changes. He doesn't boast or mourn. He simply is. And in that, the film makes its first symbolic statement. Survival is not about nostalgia. It's about evolution. The mariner doesn't long for the past. He doesn't wax poetic about dry land or fallen cities. Unlike Helen or Enola, he doesn't carry dreams of trees or birds. He is the embodiment of nature's cruel efficiency, adapted, hardened, solitary. But as the film unfolds, it's not just the world that softens around him. He begins to shift. Emotionally. Spiritually. He learns to connect, to sacrifice, to care. That arc, from mutation to humanity, isn't just character growth. It's metaphor made flesh. A symbol of how, even in the bleakest timelines, empathy remains a survival trait. Fresh water becomes more than resource. It becomes morality. In a world ruled by scarcity, fresh water is treated like gold, a substance to be hoarded and traded. But it's also used to measure character. The mariner filters and drinks his own recycled waste. It's grim, stark, but honest. Meanwhile, others steal, kill, and deceive to get their share. In this way, water becomes a mirror. It reflects not only survival, but the cost we're willing to pay for it. Then there is dirt, real, precious, black soil. In a world of endless blue, dirt is sacred. When the mariner produces it at the atoll, it stuns the community into reverence and fear. He might as well have produced fire from thin air. It's not just evidence of dry land, it's a relic of the earth that once was. Symbolically, dirt stands in for truth, the tangible proof that something better existed and might still exist. It is the foundation of dreams. And when Enola is later revealed to have a tattoo that might lead to that place, her body becomes a map not just to land, but to hope itself. Enola's tattoo is perhaps the film's most literal symbol, but also its most layered. It sits between her shoulder blades like wings not yet formed. A strange, indecipherable map. Coordinates, perhaps. Or maybe a compass etched in flesh. It turns her into an object of desire. For the deacon, a prize. For Helen, a responsibility. For the mariner, eventually, a reason. But more than anything, Enola represents a future not yet corrupted by the sea or the cynicism of survival. She is not jaded. She draws pictures of things she's never seen. Birds, trees, sunshine. Things she believes in without having proof. In a film drenched in realism and hardship, her imagination is an act of resistance. And then there's the ocean itself. The sea, throughout history, has always symbolized both life and death. Here, it is no different. It is the source of all things. It is the enemy and the cradle. It feeds and kills. It surrounds and isolates. The film uses the ocean not just as a setting, but as an emotional landscape. When the camera pans out over the endless blue, it doesn't just say, "This is Earth." It says, "This is all there is." The characters aren't just fighting pirates or storms. They're fighting oblivion in this way. The sea becomes a metaphor for uncertainty. Characters are never grounded. They're always floating, always drifting. There are no homes, only shelters. No cities, only rumors. Everything is temporary. The ocean, vast and unmoving, becomes the visual metaphor for human aimlessness. When you can't see land, direction becomes a matter of belief. And belief, what you choose to chase, becomes who you are. The smokers, led by the deacon, exist on the other end of this symbolic spectrum. They live not by adapting, but by devouring. They worship oil, black, thick, toxic, as if it were sacred. Their ship, the rusting remains of the Exxon Valdez, isn't just a location. It's a time capsule, a relic of a world that ran on combustion and convenience. The deacon wears old-world debris like royalty, cigarette cartons as currency, machine guns as totems. He doesn't want to find dry land to start over. He wants it so he can rule again. He is the film's embodiment of regression. Where the mariner evolves, the deacon clings. Where others dream of planting, he dreams of plundering. He uses charm as a weapon, leading not with violence at first, but with promises. His people believe in him because he offers certainty, purpose. But his world is built on rot. His oil supply is running out. His lies are unraveling. He is, quite literally, burning the last of the old world in a futile attempt to conquer the new one. The deacon's faith in land is twisted. He believes in it not as salvation, but as conquest. He is what happens when the past refuses to die. And then there is Helen. Unlike the mariner, she remembers. Unlike Enola, she knows. Unlike the deacon, she evolves. She is the film's quiet moral compass, navigating not with maps, but with instinct. Her bond with Enola isn't maternal in the conventional sense, it's deeper. Protective. Rooted in defiance. She doesn't just want dry land. She wants something better than what came before. Her journey is one of trust. She gambles everything on the mariner, not because he is safe, but because she believes people can change. Which, ultimately, is the film's most enduring theme: redemption through connection. The mariner is not saved by dry land. He's not saved by victory. He's saved by people. By letting them aboard. By risking more than survival. He begins the story as the future's first mutation, a solitary echo of evolution. But he ends it as a man, a father figure, a protector, a friend. And that arc matters more than any map. The final act reinforces this. When they reach dry land, when the myth becomes real, it is not presented with fanfare. There are no triumphant horns. No grand reveals. Just trees, dirt, silence, and a photograph. A picture of Enola, taken before the world was lost. That moment doesn't just answer the plot's questions. It resolves its emotional journey. The photo is proof of past, present, and future converging. Enola isn't just the map. She is the memory. Dry land isn't heaven. It isn't a miracle. It's just ground. But in a world that's only ever known waves, that makes it everything. And yet, the mariner leaves. He sails away, not because he doesn't belong, but because he knows he doesn't. He has gills. He has sails in his blood. Land might be a future, but it's not his future. He returns to the sea, not in exile, but in peace. His journey isn't to settle. It's to protect. To keep moving. To keep believing that what he found, connection, purpose, redemption, can stay safe while he drifts back into the unknown. Symbolically, that last sail into the horizon is the film's most powerful image. It says that not all heroes build kingdoms. Some guard them from a distance. That even in a world where everything floats, some anchors are invisible, tied not to land, but to people. In the end, the film's themes are not subtle. They are soaked into every frame, every gust of wind, every line etched into Enola's back. Survival. Change. Hope. Memory. Evolution. The refusal to let go. The willingness to become something new. And above all, the belief that even after the world ends, humanity still floats, bruised, battered, burning, and finds its way home. It started with water, not just as an idea, but as a reality that would define every decision, every frame, every frustration. From the first day of pre-production, everyone involved in the making of this film knew they weren't just shooting a story. They were building a world, one where the ocean wasn't just a backdrop but the very language of the narrative. And that decision, to commit fully to the setting, to let the sea be more than scenery, shaped the film's techniques in ways that were both groundbreaking and, at times, almost impossible. The first challenge was visual. When you set an entire film on the open ocean, you're at the mercy of a horizon that never changes. There are no skylines, no forest canopies, no shadows of buildings to hide your cuts or cheat your geography. It's just sky and water. The director and cinematographer embraced this with a radical clarity. Instead of fighting the sameness, they used it. Long, slow tracking shots became a signature. The camera would drift with the waves, mirroring the way the world now floats without anchor. The pace wasn't rushed, it breathed. This meant rethinking traditional action filmmaking. On land, you can frame chaos with tight corners, shadows, and cover. At sea, everything is exposed. To compensate, the camera became more fluid, more patient. It lingered on the water's shimmer, followed the curve of sails catching wind, and moved not just with characters, but with the rhythm of the tide. A single wide shot could last minutes, with the world shifting subtly in the background. Clouds moving, waves lapping, the wind nudging the frame lighting was another massive consideration. Natural light was a gift and a curse. Shooting at sea meant that every scene had to bow to the sun's position. Crews would wait for hours for the right hue in the sky, for the perfect golden hour softness, or the exact overcast gray that matched a previous shot. The director of photography often called the sun his second actor, always unpredictable but undeniably powerful. And then there were the sets, if you could call them that. There were no studio recreations. No painted backdrops. The floating atoll was real, built from scratch, and constructed to be functional on water. It swayed. It sank. It sometimes drifted. But it looked like it belonged to this new world. The same went for the mariner's trimaran, a vessel engineered to fold, unfold, sail, and survive. It wasn't just a prop. It was a character. And filming it was an act of choreography. Camera crews had to learn the boat's rhythms, anticipate its turns, adjust to its shifting deck. Aerial shots became key to unlocking the world's scale. Helicopter-mounted cameras swept over endless water, framing the characters as tiny specks in an indifferent ocean. These shots, while breathtaking, were incredibly hard to execute. Coordinating actors, stunt boats, and camera helicopters, all on moving water, meant multiple takes, endless resets, and hours of waiting for the perfect alignment. But the result? Immersion. The viewer never feels like they're watching a set. They feel like they're adrift. Underwater photography played an equally crucial role. The film didn't just take place above the surface. It dove beneath it. Entire sequences were shot below the waves, where the ruins of the old world sleep in silence. These scenes required divers, underwater rigs, and lighting that could penetrate the depths without overpowering the natural murkiness. The cinematographer chose a palette of cold blues and soft greens to evoke memory, loss, and beauty. Down there, the world is still, and the camera moves like a ghost. Sound design was equally deliberate. The ocean was ever present, not just visually, but orally. You heard it in every scene. Not just the crash of waves, but the soft slap of water against hulls, the distant screech of gulls, the whine of wind through tattered sails. Foley artists recorded real ocean sounds from dozens of locations, layering them to build a constantly shifting sonic environment. Even in moments of silence, the sea whispered. When the mariner dove underwater, the sound design changed entirely. Dialogue muted. Score faded. You were left with the sound of breathing, bubbles, and heartbeat. These scenes created a sense of intimacy that contrasted with the vastness above. It was like slipping into a memory, a moment of calm in a world that never stops moving. The score, composed with a careful blend of orchestral depth and tribal percussion, served not as a backdrop but as an emotional tide. It swelled during moments of revelation, dropped out entirely during scenes of tension, and rose like a wave in moments of awe. Instruments were chosen not for grandeur, but for texture. Drums that echoed ancient rhythms. Flutes that mimicked wind. Strings that sounded like taut sails straining against the mast. Editing, too, was shaped by the water. Pacing was critical. The film didn't race. It flowed. The editors avoided quick cuts in favor of transitions that mimicked the ocean's roll, gentle dissolves, slow pushes, lingering crossfades. Action scenes, when they came, hit harder because they broke the rhythm. They were sharp interruptions in an otherwise gliding narrative. A calm sea, suddenly storming. And yet, nothing about this film was easy to capture. Behind every smooth sequence were logistical nightmares. Boats capsizing. Cameras malfunctioning from salt exposure. Actors drifting out of frame. One story from the set involves a key shot where the mariner rescues Enola. The actors nailed their performance, but the wind had turned the entire set 45 degrees, throwing off the sun, the sound, and the background. They had to wait hours, anchored in place, for the sea to cooperate. But those challenges shaped the film's authenticity. You can feel it in every frame, that this wasn't made on a green screen. That the sunburns were real. That the character's exhaustion wasn't just acting. The water seeps into the story, into the fabric of the filmmaking, making it not just believable, but tangible. You don't watch the film. You float in it. And then came the storm behind the scenes, the one no camera could capture. The box office. Before it even opened, the film was buried under headlines. The budget had ballooned, reportedly exceeding $170 million, a staggering amount at the time. The media dubbed it a disaster before it premiered. Fishtar, they called it, comparing it to infamous flops. Kevin's Gate. The narrative was clear. Too big, too ambitious, too wet to succeed. But the truth was more complicated. When it finally released, the film made a respectable showing. It didn't break records, but it stayed afloat. It earned back its budget. Then it kept going. International audiences embraced it. Home video sales surged. And over time, it built something rarer than a blockbuster: longevity. People returned to it. Not for hype, but for its world. For its sincerity. For its refusal to be ironic. It became a cult favorite, admired for the very things it was once mocked for: its earnestness, its commitment, its handmade scale. Directors began to cite it as an influence. Film schools taught it as a lesson in how to shoot in hostile environments. And audiences, years later, still talked about the first time they saw that endless ocean and felt something stir. Because what this film did, what it still does, is use filmmaking not just as storytelling, but as immersion. It pulls you in with its scale, holds you with its atmosphere, moves you with its quiet moments of humanity in a world that has lost everything. The filmmaking choices, every lens flare, every floating camera shot, every textured soundscape, aren't there to dazzle. They're there to carry you, to drift you gently into a world where the rules are different, where time moves like water. And even now, after all the box office arguments have faded, after the reviews have cooled, that feeling remains. A boat, a sail, a world beneath waves, and a story told not in noise, but in the hush of the tide. That is the legacy of this film's technique. Not perfection, but presence. They were sunburnt and windblown, half submerged and half lost in a world made of water. 4 months, the cast of this floating odyssey lived more at sea than on land, not just acting out the story of survival, but experiencing it. What they endured became legend. And when the final cut was assembled, what emerged from the surf wasn't just a film about a post-apocalyptic ocean. It was a raw, bruised, strangely beautiful performance captured through salt-crusted lenses. But it wouldn't have worked if the people at its heart didn't carry something deeper than just lines or stunts. What made it endure was the cast. Who they were, how they worked, and how they became part of the myth they were helping to tell. At the center of it all was the mariner, played with quiet intensity by Kevin Costner. He didn't just star in the film, he anchored it, both literally and metaphorically. From the very beginning, Costner was committed in a way that both inspired and exhausted those around him. He trained for months to maneuver the trimaran, a sailboat so complex it needed its own crew just to reset between takes. He performed his own dives, climbed the mast, handled rough seas with a calm that belied the chaos just out of frame. But that dedication came at a cost.